Okay, well, thank you. In the house today, we have Michelle Tippens. Michelle Tippens she served in the Army for over 4 years. And her accolades, what are your accolades?
Oh, man. Okay, so as far as like my educational, I guess, accolades or accomplishments, so I have a bachelor's and a master's degree, both in the criminal justice field.
Mhm.
Um, my master's is administration of justice and security. So I think that's kind of neat because it's about preparedness and being able to construct a readiness plan and look at potential issues and prepare for things in advance,
Mhm.
right? So understanding like the long term when you look at things. Um, in addition to that, I recently in 2015 I started a nonprofit. Oh, thank you, darling. You're so awesome. I started a nonprofit. It's called the Hawaii Veterans Cannabis Alliance.
Okay.
And the mission of that nonprofit is to reduce the frequency of veteran and PTSD related suicides
Mhm.
in the US annually. So, with that,
Well, do you mind if I ask you
you can ask me
how
anything.
okay,
So,
so how did that come about? Well, I know personally, but for our viewers and stuff, so you have got a little bit of history with that. That's why, right?
yeah, well, yeah. So, so the foundation story basically in 2014, 2015, this statistic comes out that in the US, on average, 22 veterans a day commit suicide. And that's a huge number. It represents about 24% of, or is that right? Yeah, about 24%. I feel like that's right, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's only 8%. But it's this huge percentage of the number. I think it's 24%. And then veterans actually only represent 8% of the community,
Mhm.
right? So we're triple overrepresented in the suicide number. And for that number, only 26 states report to that number. So the potential projected number is
It's
about
far higher.
70 a day.
Yeah.
So when you just have this idea, okay, well, about one veteran every hour commits suicide.
Mhm.
And a lot of those suicides are related to drug overdoses, often pharmaceutical drug overdoses,
Mhm.
where they're given a bevy of different drugs. At one point, I was on 28 different medications from the VA.
Wow.
And I was lucky that I was able to manage that many pills.
Mhm.
I just didn't take them on a schedule like you're supposed
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
I took them when I felt symptoms.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's probably the thing that saved me because when I took all of them together like I was
Like
supposed
a
to,
cocktail, yeah.
you get this zombie thing. It's
Yeah.
really common talked about. And so, anyway, so this statistic kind of blew my mind. And cannabis is very effective for PTSD.
Mhm.
And I've studied psychology a little bit in college when I did like my basic general requirements and stuff.
Mhm.
I've done a little bit of psychology at a couple levels.
Mhm.
And I applied the psychological concepts that are supposed to drive people away from suicide into this 501c,
Okay.
right? And then 2 years later, um, or 3 years later, my fiance commits suicide.
That's
And
heavy.
that kind of like, he's also a veteran. And that kind of, I mean, it really threw me off. Like, it was a complicated thing where I felt galvanized in the cause, but I also like really needed like
Mhm.
some time
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
emotionally.
Mhm.
And
Definitely.
so um we kind of entered into this like semi limbo where there were other veterans who were dealing with like meetings and stuff
Like
like
a
that.
support group, sort of?
Well, okay, so yeah, so the nonprofit is basically we're just an organization geared to helping veterans gain knowledgeable access to this plant as medicine. So helping veterans understand how to self diagnose what type of weed. So if you use cannabis either medically or recreationally,
Mhm.
um, you can tell that different smells of weed will give you different results,
Mhm.
right? And along with that is our body's ability to kind of decode what smells are going to be good for what our personal little medical snowflake of a condition is, right?
Mhm.
And so, because of that, if you learn how to just smell weed with a discerning eye, or knows, I guess, you'll be able to figure out which weed's going to work best for you. And that can really be a level up for a patient.
So it's not really. So do you feel that it's not really? It's more smell and aroma based than strain based.
Facts.
Yeah,
Dead on facts. Like that's a fact, because you have to really look at cannabis in the way that it's been with us long term. Because cannabis was our medicine before we even understood that we needed to drink water every day, right? When we lived in caves, we could find cannabis in the jungle or, the forest or wherever it was growing by smell and by its visual like appeal to us. If you grow weed or if you've ever been around a bunch of plants,
coming down the road.
You can walk through a greenhouse full of weed to where all the smells are mixed together, and there'll just be a plant that just looks sexy. I used to grow. I have many beautiful pictures, and I'll send you some. You can put it on the website or whatever.
Cool.
You can walk through a greenhouse and just be like, "Oh, you're the one. Yeah. I'm going to smoke you later, baby. I'm going to light you on fire and we're going to have a great time together."
Yeah.
And that's really something to have a plant appeal to you in that way. It's the same way that people just like how a certain leaf looks, for example. Like a maple leaf is a super popular looking plant leaf.
It looks like a marijuana leaf to me.
Right.
Like a chubby marijuana leaf.
But think about what you get from a maple tree. You get this super sweet, wonderful, so of course it's an attractive looking leaf because the plant is drawing us in and saying, "Hey, try me."
Yeah.
So weed does that too. And it does it through the way it looks and the way it smells. And so I love doing that. I love taking people into a farm or a place that has 6 or 7 or 10 different strains and saying, "Hey, smell them all. And the one that you want to stick your head in the bag, buy that one. And then buy the one that sometimes you can't smell weed. Like I'll smell stuff and I'm like, I can't, there's nothing, no smell." And my friend will smell it and be like, "Oh my God, you can't smell this?"
Yeah.
But it's because our medical needs are different. So the plant doesn't even, I would walk right past that plant and never even smell it in the forest. And so your brain knows what's up in there. Like everything feeds into this mass database that controls everything, right? It knows that your pinky toe is 2 degrees to the left more than yesterday. Like your brain knows that. And so you're really equipped to be able to decode nature like that. And that's just because we evolved with this. This isn't going to a pharmacy and having a pill that tells you nothing about what's inside of it, right? And so I really like that about cannabis medicine, and I like how effective it is.
Pills are about money. Cannabis is about healing.
Well, and pills are about, and you got the money, and that's the cute part, but they call it therapy. These are therapeutic drugs. I don't want therapy, fucker. I want you to make me better. I want a cure. I paid you for cures, doc. I didn't pay you for therapy. What's therapy? You're going to have me in here for 2 years?
Yeah.
And then I'm still not better, right? That's like the psychiatrist. It's like, how do you feel about that? I feel like I'm messed up. That's why I paid you this hourly rate, bro. Tell me what's going on, you know? So, tell me why I'm mad at my mom or something. Why am I having these problems? Whatever it is.
Stems from childhood issues.
Let's get to it so I can start handling the problem. And you know what? I love that I said it that way because that's how I feel about politics. That's how I feel about politics. And I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about politics.
I did, because I want to see some change. I'm super interested in seeing
everybody
change.
wants a cure. Let's fix the problem. And a lot of times what I get or what I see, and I think that a lot of other people who go to the Capitol a lot, especially in Hawaii, there's a lot of who are we going to blame? What are we doing? Who do we need to point the finger at right now? And the thing is, I don't care who get the finger pointed. How about we solve the problem and then y'all can worry about finger pointing later when we're no longer dealing with the issue. And I feel like we spend years and years in Congress playing this issue game where it's whose problem is this and who caused this issue and
whose fault instead
of a
solution.
They want to point at each other. And it's like, no, dude, this is the solution. Let's drive forward with the solution. And once the solution's in place, we can vote out whomever was part of that problem.
Yeah.
And those people are easy to identify. They voted no on the solution.
Yeah. They told on themselves. Yeah, they snitched on themselves for real.
That's a really good way to vote. Like, try that on for size. Google or you don't have to Google. You can go to Hawai'i, capital.hawaii.gov, CAPITOL, not like lowercase and capital letters, but the Capitol building is with an O. So capital.hawaii.gov. And you can actually look, I believe, at each legislator and see what they voted on yes and no on, I think. And if not, I think there's a website called VoteSmartorg. And that's a really good way. You look at, okay, what's important to me? And then you search how your legislator voted on that issue, right? And that should allow people to kind of get a litmus test on who they do or don't want to vote for. If the guy who's in office now ain't helping out your cause or your way of life, why are you continuing to vote for his party? Why are you continuing to vote for that person? Why are you voting for the person who's in office right now? If you're not happy with the roads, or if you're not happy with the towing, or if you're not happy with the way that the government addresses permits.
Yeah. Oh, just it's just like a restaurant. If you get shitty service at a restaurant, you're not indebted to that restaurant to eat at that restaurant forever. If you're not getting good service or the food tastes bad, go to another restaurant. So I feel like that's how, I'm a staunch Republican or a Democrat and I have to be. You don't have to be. When their values and their motives change and you feel it changing and stuff, you can move.
Yeah.
You're not stuck to that. Yeah. So.
Right. And that's really beautiful that people should see it that way. And not only that, like, don't give them, like, instead of giving them your business, i.e. your vote, and give it to somebody else, but also, like, write a review. Let a couple people know, like, hey, yo. And so we're on Big Island. And the person who is our mayor right now, I did not vote for. And the reason I did not vote for him is because he came from our prosecutor's position. And I know personally several people that have been directly affected by his decision to either A, prosecute them, or B, not prosecute someone who committed a criminal act against them. So I have one person who had her foot entirely crushed. A woman ran over her while violating a restraining order. So this woman was on her property violating a restraining order and ran over her foot and crushed her foot. She's 2.5 years into recovery. And Mitch Roth's office failed to prosecute within the 2-year statute of limitations. So he just sat on the case, he or his office, and he runs the office. So, and just sat on the case until it was like, oh, sorry, we can't prosecute anymore because now it's been too long. Well, that's not a reason. That's an excuse.
Yeah.
You know, you guys get paid to show up here and prosecute crimes. And I'm sorry, perhaps the 35 felonies that you were trying to charge Mike Ruggles with kept you too busy to prosecute this person who was in violation of a restraining order and caused major bodily damage to my friend. This woman had her foot crushed. She will never be able to walk without that foot, so that foot will never heal properly, and it'll never be the same again. This woman's life has been altered forever. And we vote for the prosecutor, and we vote for the mayor. And this person went from prosecutor to mayor. I didn't vote for him. I chose to put my business elsewhere, right? And I think a lot of people should have been able to hear that review. You know what I'm saying? Like, And so that's why we do have to engage that process a little bit. I think that a lot of people feel overwhelmed with voting. And
I mean, okay, so like with the whole Trump thing and stuff,
such a polarized thing.
He forced everybody to look at politics. Like people, I'm too busy, I'm not paying attention, but he kind of brought politics to the forefront, and I'm happy about that. Now people they're engaged. They're actually listening to people's policy and what they're doing or what they're not doing.
Yeah.
I think that's super important for change, because now you can see, just like how you said, when they're not doing their job, there's a reason for them not doing their job.
Yeah.
And to me, it's whenever you're that selective, it's criminal.
Yeah.
And you should just be taken out of office, or you should just lose your job right the fuck away.
Yeah.
How are they getting away? How are they getting away with this?
So he raised over $150,000 for his campaign. I think about how many people live on Big Island. Mm-hmm. So he raised almost $1 per person. He was able to. You couldn't drive anywhere without seeing his signs just plastered everywhere. And I think I don't know this number for sure, but over 100,000. And I think what I heard was 125,000. But you can look these things up online. Mm-hmm. These are all transparency things. You can look up campaign contributions and how much of them came from large businesses, small businesses, individuals. All that stuff is tracked. Over 120,000 of his campaign contributions came from businesses. So what happened was all those businesses put his signs up too, right? Mm-hmm. So everywhere you drove, there's Mitch Roth signs plastered on the signs of all these businesses, right? Mm-hmm. So his name was just everywhere. And oftentimes when people don't know who to vote for, they'll vote for whoever they've seen most.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
So
it can be at the point it gets confusing, and you can go in there with your whole list in your head, unless you wrote it down.
Yeah.
It gets like that. It gets kind of confusing.
I'm a big advocate for at-home voting, for voting in absentee. And now Hawaii has gone to a 100% mail-in vote. And that wasn't because of COVID. They actually voted that in before COVID. Mm-hmm. It just was super handy when we had COVID that we were already there. And so the idea is that, and why I like it, is that you can sit down, and I sit down with my ballot and my bong. Mm-hmm. And I put, I swear, and I put YouTube on, because sometimes some of this stuff is really sensitive to me. I recognize how closely politics is in our lives, how closely it's entangled into our everyday lives, the mm-hmm. speed limit, how much things cost to get to Hawaii mm-hmm. is politics. Mm-hmm. The fact that we have to get a permit to put a window-mounted air conditioner into your house is politics. Yeah. And so I get really sensitive. So I smoke a bong, and I look everybody up on YouTube, all the ballot people on YouTube. And I think about not just what they answered in the question, but did I feel like they were being evasive, or did I feel like they were just pandering? Or, for example, do I feel like they are promising things that are ridiculous?
Or they're promising everybody everything.
And that's what happens is when you have someone who's just making you promises mm-hmm. and someone who's giving you solutions, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I did run last year. So with me, I try to look at an issue and go, okay, well, how can we actually address this issue? How can we make changes where we stand mm-hmm. to fix the problem that we're dealing with? And then when I look back at the debates and I watch again, because I don't listen to anybody else, I want to have my answer in my head. But when I look at the answers that we're getting from the other people, and it's oh, well, we'll definitely get more federal money for our state. And I'm well, all 50 states are going through an economic crisis right now, and all 50 states are going to be needing extra money. And we're already $27 trillion in debt. So where's federal
the money coming from?
What federal money are we talking about right now? Because that's a fantasy. Mm-hmm. And so we need to address things like adjusting the tax rate. Mm-hmm. We're in an economic crisis. And if you want to be able to stimulate the economy, you're going to have to put money back in people's hands. So how about you refund 2019's tax money?
That'd be great, because I just got something in the
Give
mail
everybody
for that.
Their money back. And even businesses, for example, those businesses would get their money back too. And that would allow them to pay their employees to come back to work. Yeah. And that whole thing, oh my goodness, I'm so frustrated with all of it, because everyone's trying to pretend like masks are helping. We have these hourly announcements we get on our radio mm-hmm. in Hawaii, which I just turn off the radio. I can't deal with it. It upsets me, because it's terrorism. They're reinforcing this fear that they want to gender in you mm-hmm. to make sure you do what they say. Everyone's acting like the masks were helping, but not a single person wore it right. So don't act like it was helping when we all acknowledge nobody was wearing it right. Come on.
I thought that was part of shock testing.
It's rough. Yeah. Oh, yeah. What's acceptable?
Yeah.
What's acceptable? And the litmus test and the degrees where I'm going to take away your freedoms in tiny little steps.
Small increments.
So that you get used to it. and then you won't fight it, and then you'll get used to it a little more. I remember before TSA at the airport.
Oh yeah.
And I felt more safe at TSA then. I felt like I had my privacy intact. Like people weren't rummaging through my underwear. If you travel like a lot of us, you try to travel with just carry-on. So you don't have to wait for the baggage and worry about somebody losing it. Like you probably have a lot of electronics. Like you don't want your stuff to get lost and messed with. So yeah, I don't want somebody digging through my chones in the line, everybody walking by, and my business is getting dangled around. And what is this? None your business. Put it back in the bag. Like it's not a liquid, bro.
Yeah, for real, right? Oh man.
So yeah, like there's a lot of people that don't remember before. What is that? Wheel of Fortune, and Wheel of Fortune isn't forever, you guys. So just recognize that stuff like the TSA wasn't considered number one long term. Like this was supposed to be a short term answer to a critical moment in our history when we were trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, totally.
And now we've adjusted things. Like I feel like we would be far better served training ticketing personnel and maybe training the X-ray tech guys, the regular airport people. Give them a class on what someone who's being evasive looks like. Someone who's trying to hide something. And let them cue in on those people instead of creating this whole new layer of bullshit that's just really invading people's privacy more than anything. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of stuff we could be doing a little bit better. But everybody, and I don't know, I think a lot of people feel that way, but a lot of people don't feel powerful anymore in their government. I think that this behavior of like shirking responsibility, when you give away responsibility for something, you give away your power in that thing because now you're no longer acknowledging that you play a part in it. Right? You go, I didn't, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And then now you have no control over what's going on. And then you're upset because you have no control. So let's just fix it. Take responsibility again. Take September seriously.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I've always felt like I like choice. I like having a choice. So it'd be my choice to wear a mask or not. I like having that choice.
And you know your own medical needs.
You totally
know if you're immune frail.
Yeah. Oh, you definitely do. And, but the fact that we're more likely to die in a car crash on the way home. So are you going to take away cars? And if you take away, if you take away our right to choose whether we want to wear or not wear a mask, are you then going to soon thereafter take away our right to jump in the ocean? Because now it's not safe anymore.
Yeah, there's sharks out there,
Yeah.
Sharks live in there.
There's all kind of dangerous stuff. Yeah, there's all kind of currents and stuff. So
oh, yeah, just the water itself can just snatch you.
Yeah, keep choice alive and, make it bigger than I feel like you got to make it bigger than your anger towards a certain group of people. If you take away people's, ability to choose, then what are we after that,
Well, and that's really the core of America, right? Like the crux, what made us become this separate entity from just being colonial existence outside of Britain, right? Because we used to be British colony.
Yeah. We left to escape their taxes.
And we left that. We said, we don't want to be taxed without being able to be part of the legislative process. You guys are screwing us. You're taking all our money, but we don't get to say anything about how we're being treated. Right? You don't fix our roads because none of them live here, right? So all these guys are back in Britain taking all America's money back to Britain. It's kind of like living in Hawaii.
Yeah, totally.
America takes all our effing money through Target and Walmart and all these places, all these big box stores. They take all our money back to the continent, and then they tell us how to live. And we only get 2 people in each house. So, or each branch of the legislative government. So you have the Senate, which has 100 people in it, and we get 2. And that's our equal representation, right? And then the other side, I think there's like 486 or something in the House, and we get 2 of those as well. So not a lot of not a lot of representation for us in that way. And so, unfortunately, we do have to deal with that, where we're dealing with not quite getting the amount of representation that we would want to have, when in fact we do send basically all of our money back to wherever. Even when you look at the tourism industry, the only wages that stay here are like the service industry level wages or the lower paid level wages. When you look at where the corporate dollars go, Hilton, Westin, Wyndham, wherever, all these big hotels, even our local hotels have been bought out by these larger chains and are now operated by Ohana West or whatever the hell it is. And so what you have is all of this money is going back, and all that's left here is basically slave wages. So we've become a colony in our own country. I put the hash marks, or because a lot of us know that Hawaii didn't really enter the way you're supposed to enter. So
I just talked to Kepa about that yesterday. So we always go over. I think that's a cool thing about like the round block demographic. You know, they all know that. You know about the illegal occupation. And where do we go from there though? Like now we all have that Ikena knowledge, and we all know that we're illegally occupied under a strange form of what do they call it? Strange form of occupation.
Well, we've almost got like hold on. Now I lost the word too. So when you get kidnapped, you get Stockholm syndrome. You heard of that? It's basically where you like the people that kidnapped you. And so in Hawaii, we almost have this like bastardized version of that, where a lot of people are on federal assistance. And so a lot of people, and this goes back to the voting, a lot of people vote Democrat because they want to make sure that their assistance doesn't get tangled with. Which, if you're not happy with anything else, man, let's just look them up individually on YouTube with a bong. Just trust me. Just do it that way. But yeah, so where was I going? Tell me where we were.
About losing their
losing their benefits and everything. So you have this bastardized like Stockholm syndrome, where the your captor is now your benefactor, right?
And you're thanking them for the bread and water that they give you in your dungeon.
Thank you. And Hitler did that. Hitler did like a seminar, if you will, and took and was just like torturing these like Jewish, and in front, I was losing it for a second. I was like, Polish? No, that's wrong. My family's from Poland, so that's what the connection for me is. So he's like torturing these people, right? And they're terrified of him. And then he offers them bread, and they take it, and they trust him completely that he hasn't poisoned it, and they're thanking him for it and all this stuff. And he goes, it's like this every time. No matter how badly you treat them, if you just give them scraps, they'll thank you. And that's a lot of what happens out here.
No, totally. With the Hawaiian government and
so we have
officials.
We have to basically acknowledge that if you look back on the Department of Elections website, the first election was the election to like annex, like when we voluntarily entered into the United States, 100% of registered voters voted. Do you know what that means? They rounded up all the white people that would vote the way they wanted. They took them to the polls. They said, register and vote. And that was it. Everyone who was registered voted. That means not a single person was late, had to work, couldn't find a sitter, had a problem getting a ride. Like not a single person missed the vote.
Red flag.
That should be enough to just know that's bullshit right there, right? Everybody showed up. Everybody can't even show up to school. Or preschool, you know? Come on, you guys. See how the octave went up? That's when you know it's the truth, is when it shoots all the way up like that. So yeah. And then you look at now where we have a dismal turnout because a lot of people feel like the government's their oppressor, but it's really our instrument of vindication. Because if we choose who we want and we find someone, it's part of why, and I'm sorry, I'm going to like campaign a little bit. It's part of why I thought I'd be good at it, because I was trained by the military to lobby. I was trained by the military to be diplomatic and meet with people and figure out ways how my interests or our interests could line up with what those people wanted too. So I think that it's really important to be able to walk into a room and say, okay, this is what Hawaii wants. And now how do I get there? So no matter who you're voting for, you want to find someone who can get that done and who can recognize, okay, this is how we'll make a solution. And in order to get that solution, I've got to go to meet all these people. And now I have to make my solution look like their solution. So cannabis is a really good way to look at that issue. So you find some way, if you want to talk to a Republican about cannabis, you talk to that Republican about cannabis by saying, hey, look, I can show you how this issue, this plant, if you help me make this legal, now it makes you all this tax money.
Mm-hmm.
And now we can get you all this additional tax money. You can shrink your government. You can get this money back into people's pockets. You can fix the roads. You can do something with money that's not coming out of your local citizens' pockets, right? And then you look at a Democrat. Now you have to have a totally different approach because Democrats want to see how your issue is going to benefit the larger group, how it's going to benefit society. They see the government, well, theoretically, because I don't think this is really happening anymore. And that's because the bipartisan kind of thing has broken the system. So politics is supposed to be a whole bunch of different parties. And that way you have all these different pressure points to kind of keep the
Everything
movement
else
of
in
the
check.
law in the middle. Yeah, you want to have conservative, strong, conscientious law. And so you have all these different places pushing all together. If you have two people or two parties pushing, you just have a tug of war. And everybody's goal is to win. Nobody's goal is the benefit of anybody else who's not these two people. And that's where it's broken. So recognizing that we need 5 or 6 parties to be represented, not just on the ticket, but actually physically there going, hey, you guys are really overstepping what this is supposed to mean or what that is supposed to mean or what my demographic wants. You know, not everybody wants a 35 mile per hour speed limit on a 4-lane highway that's divided with a 2-lane wide grass median. You know, like people, anybody who hears this on the continent, you guys are like, what? Because that's definitely 50 miles an hour or better. But in Hawaii, they will slow the speed limit down just because there's a traffic light coming up. And that's nuts. You know, that's what the traffic light is for, is to slow down traffic. Let people know it's coming and they'll be mindful to look and see if it's going to be red and hit their brakes on their own. So anyways, yeah, it's super interesting how this will all like weave around. And so you want to find someone who you believe is cure driven or fixing driven. You don't want somebody who's trying to blame somebody. You want somebody who's going to go, hey, I think this could be a good solution to what we're looking at. And then do a little research and see if the people that you're voting for seem shady. Like, do they even answer the question?
Or do they conveniently avoid it?
Or talk about what the other guy's going to say or what the other guy did say or what he might say. You know, and it's like, instead of being argumentative, tell me your answer and I'll pick who I like based on whoever answers. So it's really nice to just take that time and look at everybody on YouTube. Because you can kind of see who's being shady, especially when you look at people. Because most people can tell. If somebody's being shady, you know. Because you can watch their body language and everything changes. They start like touching at their face and covering their mouth. They're like, oh, I gotta groom myself while I lie to you. Make sure you don't notice that I look ugly lying. So,
I mean, that's why I do these podcasts. I like to do I've had a lot of people that said, oh, let's do a Zoom one. It's like, I want these podcasts to be organic. I like to sit down and have a conversation, you know, maybe have a drink or something too. And that's the kind of content I want to put out, you know. Even if I don't agree with 100% of everything that you'll say.
You shouldn't. If you agree with everything I say, I'm lying to you. Because nobody agrees on everything.
And we don't grow through that.
Right.
You know? Just saying yes to everything, you're not going to grow from it.
Yeah. Facebook broke that a little bit too. Like you don't agree with me on this. And it's like, yeah, but
the cancel culture.
I'm allowed to have my own opinions, you know, like, and so I wave signs in Hilo every week on Saturday. I want to plug this. So on Saturday, in front of the Ford dealership, like across from the Ford dealership at the Walmart parking lot, we wave signs about the vaccine and how it should not be mandated and how it can be dangerous.
It should be
and
a
how
choice.
It's not. There's no legal liability for any vaccine manufacturer or any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not that we're saying, hey, nobody should be allowed to take it. We're not saying that. We're saying, hey, you need to look at it open eyes before you take it, and it shouldn't be required of people.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're out there saying. And this man pulled over, and I promise you, I'm going to make this short. He tried to run me over with his car. And then when I wouldn't move, he got out the car and spit at me. And I know he was trying to run me over because before he tried to run me over, he said, you know what, bitch? And got in his car and slapped it into reverse and tried to run me over.
Oh, that's terrible.
So he was so inflamed by this idea that we need the vaccine, that he was being blinded from the fact that our core inalienable right, one of the three, is liberty, which means I am allowed to be a separate entity from you and the government.
Mm-hmm.
I should not have to subserviate myself to what other people's concerns are for my own. If you're concerned, get the vaccine. If you're concerned, wear the mask. I've never told somebody to take their mask off.
Yeah, definitely.
And you shouldn't tell me to put one on. I actually have a crush injury to my chest. I was crushed in a car accident. Yeah. And I have this giant scar on my chest. And I actually have part of my lung capacity is affected by that. Mm-hmm. And it also my ability to inflate my lungs because of this crush injury. If I have to work too hard to breathe in, it actually makes the bones grind around in my chest. It's fucking horrible and painful. So making me put a mask on is like putting a pillow over my face. It's not the same as other people. Mm-hmm. I know that. Why do I have to tell that to you? Mm-hmm. Isn't that supposed to be my private business? Isn't that supposed to be protected? That's supposed to be my private stuff. And now I have to share it with every asshole in the grocery store?
Yeah, totally.
That's unfair to me. If you're worried, put your mask on.
Yeah, or put 2 masks on if you want.
Now Fauci says you got to wear 3. So how good was that one for the past year if now he says you need 3? Come on, bro.
And is it even working? Because now I heard we're going to tier 3, and it has been working. So why do we need to wear 3 masks? But that's part of it. It's part
working,
of their shock
guys,
testing.
Do more, yeah.
So and they keep on seeing
how much bullshit can I get you to do
before we fight back.
Where's that sticker I gave you? Did you see it? Did you read it? It's something about if you don't take off your muzzle. Yeah. This only ends when you take off your muzzle and stop complying. So, this girl shows up to wave signs, and we're there from 10 to 1 on Saturday. So I want to plug that the rest of the way. So we wave signs at the Walmart parking lot in front of the Ford dealership from 10 to 1 on Saturdays. And this chick shows up and she's got this t-shirt and it's got this face, line drawing of a face. And the mask has the loops around the ears, and the mask looks like this. There's this hand under the face, and it says, "It was never about safety." And it's the most beautiful. I was like, oh my God. So she made me one.
It's pretty clever. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just, I want to get the masks where the mask is actually the hand.
Yeah.
I would love to. I would wear one with a thing to keep it off my face.
Hold on. I got a mask for you.
Yeah. I need one that keeps off my face so I can breathe around it. And I definitely want one that's like the hand, just holding your mouth shut. Because I think that's what they're really trying to do, is keep us from identifying with each other as human beings. Ooh, this is beautiful. Oh, I like the RX
that's
with
what
the
I'm
bone.
sick of. I'm sick of
I'll
the
keep
lies.
this in the car because when I'm with people and they forget their masks, I'll lend it to them and let them wear it. But it's so funny to me how many people, first of all, you guys, masks, those are disposable. If you want to talk about how you use them right, they're disposable. That means you put it on once, you take it off once, and it's garbage now. It's disposable. Not, I wore it all day today. So nobody's wearing them right. Nobody's doing it right.
I see them all over the road too now.
Oh my gosh, they're everywhere.
Sidewalks.
And I don't see anybody picking those up with biohazard bags. So how come on, you guys. If it was really captured and everything, you can see my vape. You can see my vape come out of it. And I know how tiny viruses are super tiny, you guys. Super tiny. They're a little teeny tiny piece of DNA. DNA is tiny. Tiny. Okay? If you know how tiny your cells are, you can't even see a cell without a teeny tiny microscope. And then inside of that is a bunch of teeny tiny things. And then among those teeny tiny things is a teeny tiny thing that has a bunch of your DNA in it. And it's like millions of pieces of DNA in this teeny tiny thing. That's how teeny tiny. See how many times I said teeny tiny? That's how small it is.
And it's smaller than that.
A virus is just an envelope with a letter with like a little series, a little chain of that teeny tiny DNA. So basically what you're trying to look at is something that's like a letter that's been shoved under the door of the giantest library, the most biggest library that's ever been built ever. And you've piled all of that, mixed it up, and then gone, I can find the virus blindfolded. It's just not going to happen. Like, these things are so small. The idea, if you can see the smoke coming out of if you can see vape or cigarette smoke, that's way, way effing bigger. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you're just...
Well, I like that you're passionate about it. And, that's why I really wanted you on this podcast.
You should have a choice. You should have a choice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Another thing I liked about you was your stance on cannabis.
Thanks.
But
choice issue again.
Yeah. Bing. Also, you've worked with counterintelligence.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your counterintelligence.
All right. So the military identified me as someone who has a high aptitude of learning in a lot of different areas. Mm. So if you know me, you know that I know a lot of random stuff. I know how to do all kinds of crazy shit. I can fix my own brakes. I can work on my transmission. I can write. I've written for magazines. Like, I'm adaptable. And so the military identifies people who are adaptable, and they recruit us. So I went through training to basically conduct liaison between departments in the government, local departments, and identify like terrorist threat, terrorist activity, and then react to that. And then, as an extension of my training, I also went to the Defense Language Institute in California, and I was taught Arabic. So I also have the ability to speak Arabic at a not quite native level, but a pretty good level. I was about college level. I could have medical conversations and things like that. So I was doing pretty well. I spoke Arabic more fluently than English for about a year. And that's kind of weird when you forget English and you're like, fuck, what is that place? Like, I couldn't remember words, and it was like searching. Then I just have to
It's even a style of speech because, everybody else has this phonetic way of talking except English.
So, we just do whatever the hell we like. So it's English is the hardest language to learn because we have more exceptions than rules, really.
Yeah.
So it's hard to grasp. But yeah, so basically my job as a counterintelligence agent was really multi-pronged. So in stateside, and for example, 9/11, while 9/11 was going on, I was in the military in this job, this counterterrorism position.
So let me just ask you, do you think it was an inside job?
I do, but that's not because of what happened. Like, when I was in the military, I thought that, like, I was one of the first people to say, hey, look, this is Al-Qaeda. We weren't just looking at Al-Qaeda, you guys. We were looking at two organizations that were not Al-Qaeda initially. And I get to talk about this because this has been more than 10 years. So I had to sign a thing when I got out of the military. Said I had to wait 10 years to talk about this. So finally get to open my mouth. We were looking at two other organizations that initially had claimed the bombings for the Twin Towers. And the Pentagon. And what happened, basically they sent like a fax and was like, hey, that was us, right? And then they saw how big it got, like how like it kind of like grew exponentially. Like, a lot of people died, a lot of people's families were affected. It was like America was taking this shit seriously. And then they were like, wait, no, never mind. It totally wasn't us. Like, never mind. They were like, psych, just forget it. And but while we were looking at them, I was like, hey, you guys, we need to be pulling Al-Qaeda shit, because Al-Qaeda was really the only organization that had the kind of dough that this needed to happen, right? Because not everybody necessarily knows about like bin Laden and like how rich he was. But this dude was fucking Skrilla. He was rich. He's got money everywhere. And he's really the only person that had the millions of dollars that you would really need to sustain something like this and the way that it had to happen. There's all these layers, and you have to make sure that the coordination between people isn't really flagging anything. There's just a lot of players and components, right? So looking at Al-Qaeda and having all of that go down, and then the way that it all evolved, and like, so it's really weird to just be we were put in front of CNN and we were just taking down notes of, because what happens with military stuff is it's all goes through like gatekeepers, if you will, to make sure that the information we're filtering out to make decisions on is accurate. Like you don't want to take raw intelligence and try to make decisions on that. Because then you're messing with people's lives, like a lot of people.
Information Tourette's.
Yeah, and you don't want to just like start. It's like Facebook where people just forward anything that has a certain word in it, and then they start forwarding stuff. They don't even know what they're forwarding. And so that's a really bad way to like put people's lives in danger. So we were taking down raw intelligence, which is basically the news, because the news is just handing everybody anything they know just to try to be the first to tell you and get you to tune into them or whatever. And we're taking notes off of that and then trying to filter that out into the confirmed intelligence that we have already and see what's starting to like ring true, what's correlating, because we have to make decisions about the people that are in the government and the military. Like we have lives that we're concerned with. So when this all went down for me, like we're scrambling, just trying to get the intelligence correlated and corroborated so that we can give it to the person who has to make the decision that affects 150,000 families that live on this base. Because I was at Fort Hood, which is one of the largest bases. It's like Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, where it's this huge mecca of a base. And there's over 100,000 soldiers there. And we're trying to get them accurate stuff so that we can make sure everybody's safe. And that in itself is its own type of like immense PTSD, to have so many people's lives depend on whether or not you do your job right. A
small group of people that your decisions
and
definitely affect their life.
I mean, I work well under pressure. But it's because of things like that and having that go on. And so that was a big part of my job. And then when we're overseas, what our job is, half of it's to recruit spies and the other half is to identify spies. So we do a lot of interviews. When the government goes into other countries, we hire local people to do hands-off work, like janitorial work and stuff like that. But those people need to be screened so that we're not hiring somebody that's just going to like, I'll tell you guys, this common spy strategy to get information. Somebody will leave their info sitting on the desk, and then you're the janitor and you just swipe that crap right into the trash bag. You mark the trash bag and chuck it in the bin. And then you just tell your guy to go pick it up out of the bin. It's marked with an orange stripe or whatever. And so part of my job is to interview the people we're hiring to make sure that we're hiring someone who can be motivated to do
compromise your guys' security and safety.
But I'm also, the other side of that coin is that my job is to go out and find somebody who's willing to do exactly that to the other guy for us. And to find out how to motivate that person, to help that person become a spy, because now they got to learn how to do it, and all of that kind of stuff. So a lot of my job is to talk to people, make sure they like me, and identify what motivates them to my cause. And so politician work, right? Ta-da! Like it all comes full circle. So yeah, round block. See, I just did it, didn't I?
You conveniently avoided the question. Do you think it's an inside job, though?
Oh, sorry, I do. Let me tell you why. So the reason I think it's an inside job has nothing to do with all of that and my work as a counterintelligence agent, although that does plant the foundation that I approach a lot of this stuff with. Okay, so fast forward to 2015, and I start the HVCA, and we're making a logo, and this is how I get there. So we're making a logo, and I'm like, all right, what's a significant moment in military history in Hawaii that I can base my logo off of? Pearl Harbor bombings, right? So I start looking up imagery for Pearl Harbor. And what I see is the same rhetoric over and over again, that we will not forget and all of this stuff. They're using this, you guys.
It's like an advertising campaign.
Yeah, they took the same media ad campaign and slapped the new date on it. For real. And to see that, it nauseated me. It really messed with me because I felt like I was part of that. You know what I mean? And I was sent to Bosnia after 9/11. So I was part of that in our own little way, and like the way that I was engaged in that, like I was translating documents and helping people make decisions on whether or not we were going to move on identified groups.
Yeah.
So this is people's lives. And to feel manipulated in that way was kind of fucked up. And so the rhetoric that was associated with it and the way that it came out, I mean, and like the lockstep. So it's very similar to the way we look at COVID right now. So basically, there is only one permissible point of view in this topic. And anybody else who has any other point of view is labeled fringe or counter or whatever, and they're basically demonized. And you can see that now with the Plandemic video. And I don't know if you've been lucky enough to see it. I have a copy. I'll give it to you if you want it. If you look up Plandemic on YouTube, you will find hundreds of debunking videos of like other people watching it and like tearing it apart and everything, but you get zero opportunity to see it yourself and make your own decision. They've completely blacked it out. And so as soon as I saw it happening, that's when I downloaded a copy, is because I was like, oh crap, they're trying to erase this. And the reason is because when they're trying to black out a point of view, Bob Marley talks about it. When they control the education, they control your choices. And so they're really trying to make sure that anyone who doesn't believe in the status quo is silenced or demonized or made to look like they're a quack or whatever. And I know a lot of people that I trust, and I've got a pretty good education so I did a lot of biological science stuff when I was in college, and I've studied biology and microbiology and pathophysiology and all the ologies. I went to town on the ologies, you guys, because I had all these medical problems from the military, and I wanted to understand what was going on in my body. And this was my opportunity to do it. And so I took that opportunity. And the stuff that jives with what I know from all those like years and hours and bullshit of like just studying my ass off is that this mask blanket view thing that they're talking about, none of that shit jives with what I know.
Yeah.
And when I listen to people who jive with what I know, they're telling me the things that I agree with already. And so I feel really comfortable with like my perspective on it. And like I said, if people want to do it, that should be allowed.
Yeah, definitely.
And so yeah, I do think it's an inside job, but it's because I saw all the same like media ad campaign rhetoric coming out and like the same one-sided approach to how we're going to treat this with the media, and the same one-sided approach to like, if you don't agree, you're trying to kill me. You know, like if you're not anti-terrorist, you're trying to kill us. If you don't keep your mask on, you're trying to kill me. How dare you?
No, it's not you're trying to kill me. You're trying to kill your grandma or your kids or your grandma. But nobody's talking about this too. I have a newborn child, and I've never seen babies wear masks.
You're not supposed to put them on the children.
Yeah. And none of them are getting sick though.
Right, because they're building their immune system by being exposed. That's that herd immunity concept. I loved when somebody tried to give me the herd immunity concept as, oh, well, you need vaccines to make herd immunity. I'm like, no, dude, you need to look up the definition of herd immunity. It means everybody passes around a weak version of it, and everybody gets
stronger,
sick better.
Yeah.
Because you have to be exposed to something to make an antibody, and have that in your library, if you will. Yeah, so you have to like download the virus for your computer to be able to cure itself. You know, so you got to do the same thing a little bit. And I mean, the point I made last year was viruses only evolve forward. So this thing's only getting stronger, dude. Like, do you want the weak version or you want the super version? Because
you're just pushing it forward. You're speeding up that process. Just like antibiotics.
Yeah.
You know, the reason why antibiotics don't work as well as they did before is because
everybody's going to town.
Yeah. They pounded them, and they didn't allow, people's bodies to adapt to that and move forward in a more natural path, So they ruined that.
Yeah. You gotta keep antibiotics and stuff in their place, you guys. Like, I almost lost my leg in 2018. 19? I had this horrible staph infection, and I've got like these giant scars around my leg. It's so nasty. And after I waited a month, which is why I almost lost my leg, but I didn't want to use the antibiotics if I didn't need the antibiotics.
Yeah.
And I did need them, but I didn't just flippantly take them and take them for half the course and then wonder why I'm still sick and all that crap. So it's important to take them right and to take them when you're sick. not when you think you're sick.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, are you running again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe I am. I would love to run for the congressional seat again, and I'm gonna lobby for that because I'm on the executive committee for the Libertarian Party,
Mhm.
and they're the party that supports me in my campaigns. But they really want me to win.
Mhm.
That's the thing too, is they want me to win, and so we've talked about me running it for a smaller seat, like for a more concentrated area, so that we can kind of saturate a little bit better with like media dollars or whatever.
Yeah.
That's all really interesting in Hawaii too, how that all works. And so I would like to run for the federal seat just because I think that the impact the federal government has on our day-to-day like living, cost of living in specific, is super significant. And I think that if we had somebody who was really wanting to address the Jones Act and really like get in there and change that, I think we could
Can
do
you
it.
summarize the Jones Act for everybody?
Okay, so the Jones Act is basically an act that was passed in 1920. So before we were even a state, we weren't even a part of this. This is taxation without representation again. In 1920, the U.S. government passed a packet of laws that basically created a monopoly for the American shipping industry. So it's not a monopoly because there's more than one company involved, but it restricted specific activities for shipping in America to only American companies, right? So in order for you to, for example, and this is what affects us the most, go from one US port to another US port, you have to have a boat or a ship. My dad would smack me if he heard me say boat. Navy, you got to do it right. So for your ship to be able to go from US port to another US port, your ship has to be built by an American company that's employed more than half or whatever. Like I think it's like more than 80% or something, but it's a substantive amount of American employees. It has to be crewed by an American crew, and it has to be captained by an American-born captain. And so what they've done is they basically made it where if I want to send goods from China, where a lot of things are made, a lot of the cool things we like iPhones.
Yeah.
If I want to get that from China to America and I stop in Hawaii, I can't go to California now because I just stopped in Hawaii, and Hawaii is a US port. So what companies do is they go from China to California, drop everything off, and then they let an American carrier bring it back to Hawaii. And so companies like Matson specifically, and Pasha being the other one, primarily. There's those two main ones. There's maybe a couple others that are a little bit smaller. They get all of that business because they're the only American-based companies that qualify under the Jones Act to bring everything over here. Okay, so what you have is you're tripling the distance that it's being shipped if it's coming from China. And if it's coming from anywhere else, basically in the US, all of those shipping companies don't come here. They go through Matson and Pasha, and they charge international shipping rates because we're considered a sea-only like location.
Okay. So we'd
So
say
it increases everything.
So if we were to say, can we get some kind of exemption that would make
That's
our
what
goods,
I want to do.
that would make our goods cheaper?
Right. So what I think a good strategy. So the problem has been anecdotally, like over the past 100 years, and something that's lasted 100 years, you guys, come on. Like, is it really in the best interest? Who is this in the best interest of? Because the community over the last 100 years has completely changed. If you look at the landscape of our community, 1920 was a very different place than now. Like, that's pre-Baywatch, you guys. Like, think about that. So this piece of legislation is like just protected like your pit bulls. You know what I mean? Like, they're out there watching your property. These are being like voraciously protected by legislators that are lobbied hard by these companies, and they're given a lot of campaign contributions. And so what we really need to do to try to get around that, because that's why it's been impossible to get rid of it, we need to get that exemption. We need to say, hey, I recognize that this is in the best interest of the American business, but Hawaii and Alaska are being maltreated by this. And I would want to see an exemption that says any port that's more than 1,000 miles away from the next, like an interstate port. So even though we have a cluster of ports here because we're an island, to get to the next state, it's over 1,000 miles. So that would allow us to be exempted from that, to where we're not having to pay that extra. So we pay 3 times the rate for groceries that what people pay on the continent. And that's really substantive. You know, $10 for a gallon of milk versus in Texas, it's probably $2.96 for a gallon of milk.
Oh, yeah. It's just like that much in Vegas.
Yeah, it's nothing. So I think that's important for people who don't live in Hawaii to hear and recognize, is that we are being enslaved just by the cost of our food. And so it's impossible to get away from that. You have to eat.
Definitely.
So
yeah, food and lodging. Super important things.
Oh yeah, and because of our thriving tourism industry, nobody has a place to live.
Well, yeah, no, definitely. And you know, that was one of my concerns too, is these property taxes. And having to pay these property taxes. When I go to pay my I've actually paid it in change. I went to the bank.
Go in there and you're like, yo, bro.
Pennies, nickels, quarters.
Yeah.
Ones. I've got thousands of dollars.
I'm going to pay you what I owe you in the most inconvenient way possible.
So heavy, you know.
Yeah. You're like, start counting, homie.
Yeah, but you know,
when
I dropped it off, and I was angry because, you know, when I asked him, so what's this property tax? He said, respondent. It covers your respondent calls. So I was like, oh, respondent. What's a respondent call?
You mean like the 2-hour wait for a cop when somebody breaks in your house?
So he said, oh, you know, like fire and whatnot. And so I was like, okay, because, you know, hospitals are privately owned, most of them.
Yeah.
So I still have to pay for that. It's not going to cover that.
And you got to pay for the ambulance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so I told them, so what if I just pay it once and you prorate me until I use it?
Yeah.
You know, and isn't that, and they said, oh, filing fees. I said, well, I own my property. I bought it. You file it once until I sell it. We don't have to keep refiling. Yeah, you don't have to keep
checking it. Like, is the paper still there?
But that's a way, in my opinion, you know, it was a way for them to steal grandma's house. Because now you have somebody that's living on Social Security, making $700-800 a month on Social Security. Right. You know, and their cost of living, food is probably about $700 a month in food and utilities. So now you know, now our kupuna have to decide at the end of the year when this property tax comes up, which is probably about, you know, $1,400-1,500, that they don't have enough money to pay.
Yeah.
And at that point, they're just like, fuck it, I'm this old already.
I'm just gonna have to move into a home and let the state have my house.
Yeah, and you know, and then that whole family loses their stuff, and you're not gonna get it back. We don't make, typically, you know, the average Hawaiian doesn't make enough money to own their own property, which is super sad.
Well, some of that, if you look at housing expense, for example, you can buy a house for $25 a square foot in most states. Here, it's $85 plus a square foot for a house. $85 a square foot. Do the math on that, you guys, and you'll just be like, whoa, what the hell?
Even electricity, there's no electricity is 49 cents per kilowatt. Highest in the nation. You know, and average is 9 cents.
When I lived in Texas, I paid less than 4 cents a kilowatt hour, and then I moved to Honolulu, and it was 35 point something cents a kilowatt hour. Man, I thought I was gonna lose. I thought I was gonna have an aneurysm, man. It was unbelievable. So to know that my rent, I rented a room from somebody. My rent was just to pay the electric bill. It was like almost $800 a month for the electricity.
Yeah. You know, and that forces us into some really bad financial decisions where, you know, like my kids won't be able to live, you know, where I live.
Right.
So I have to hustle my ass off to, you know, put them in a situation where hopefully I can put a down payment and they can take the rest. But not a lot of people have that, you know.
Grassroots Institute does a lot of talking about that. And you guys should check them out. Grassroots Institute of Hawaii. It's a think tank organization that identifies problems that exist statewide in Hawaii and tries to actually develop solutions. So I really love those guys. And they talk about the mass exodus of the youth from Hawaii because people in their 20s can't afford to live here. Yeah. So you get out of college, you have all this debt, and now you can't afford to survive here, much less pay your loans back. Yeah. So everybody's moving away.
And the batteries on both cameras
They're
died.
dying.
And
I've spoken the batteries into submission, you guys. It's happened.
We've done a little bit over an hour. So
We'll edit.
Yeah. So thank you, Michelle, for stopping by.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening as long as you have. I appreciate you having me.
So how can people follow you or if you said some nice things and they connect with you, how can they connect with you, really?
So the website is michelleinthehouse.com.
michelleinthehouse.com.
Yeah. And
I will put that under your caption when I post it. Okay.
And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. But the best way to reach me is probably... Oh, damn, you guys. I'm like, call me, but I don't want to give everybody my phone number. That gets overwhelming.
It does.
So it would probably just be best to either go to michelleinthehouse.com. I think there's a contact button.
Okay.
Or Michelle in the House with a DA.
Okay.
Michelle in the House.
And you don't have Instagram?
I have Instagram. Like, there's an account. It's the Goddess M.
Okay, let's talk about why you deleted Instagram.
Okay, I deleted Instagram. So I deleted Instagram because December 20th, new terms and conditions went into effect in Instagram. And what they did was really shady. Instead of you logging on and having to click a button that says that you accept, and even having the knowledge that they're changing the rules on you, much less the opportunity to read the changes, they said, if you keep using Instagram after this day, you've implied your acceptance. So if you just kept using it, you accepted it by proxy. Mm-hmm. And that already is shady to me. I'm like, oh, something's going on. So they start looking at it, and all the terms and conditions, basically they can data mine your phone. They can scan through your pictures and apply algorithms to your pictures to see who you're hanging out with based on your private pictures, not the stuff you're posting, you guys. This is pictures in your gallery, in your phone.
Not just the stuff you've posted.
To identify who else you hang out with. So they're actually So part of what I did in the military when we tracked terrorist groups was like relationship mapping.
Yeah.
And you figure out who hangs out with who and how they interact with each other and all this other stuff, and who doesn't hang out with who and all this other stuff. And they're doing that through your phone now. And I was like, oh, no, not me. So yeah, basically, the terms and conditions are all of these different things where it's like, we want permission to go through your contacts and see whose phone numbers are in your phone and who you talk to and how often you call them. They want to scan through your photos. They want to also, through your Bluetooth, your Wi-Fi, your NFC connections, they want to scan and see whose devices are near your device. So they are able to map out like whose device hangs out with your device at night. Like, who are you spending the night with, and who lives with you, and things like that you might not necessarily put out there in public, but now they're using algorithms and your phone's capabilities to identify information in other people's phones and who they call. And it's this whole like layered approval thing where you're just giving them permission to like go through all your shit. And so I was like, I'm going to have to just delete this app and make sure that they're not going through all my shit. So no more. But the idea was that I would be uploading, so I wouldn't have to delete Instagram from my life forever. I'm going to upload the app to a blank phone. And then when I want to put a picture, I can just send that picture by Bluetooth, or I can upload it via an SD card. And I'm probably going to get a Faraday bag to keep that phone in. So basically a Faraday bag blocks that phone from being able to transmit or receive signals. It's like this copper-lined bag.
I went to a Joe Rogan comedy show, and before you go in the show, you put it in this bag, and they lock it, and they give you the bag.
Yeah.
So when you're done with the show,
they could unlock them again.
Then you can take it out.
That's tight.
Yeah.
What a good way to keep people from tracking the show. Like people from like doing like you do in a movie theater where you just like record the movie. Yeah, that's pimp. But yeah, so I'm considering just doing that as a way to prevent from being monitored by Instagram.
Okay. I just wanted, no, we're done right now. So we're going to close up.
We're finishing.
And thank you.
Thanks,
you told me about that. And I was just like, no, I did not look at the terms and conditions, but very interesting.
There's a lot of things in there that you're giving them permission to do that you probably don't want them to do. So.
Okay, I'm just going to enter weird stuff in my Pornhub search bar again.
Do it. Start searching weird things. It's just like the
Juju.
NSA scans your conversations for keywords.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Michelle. Aloha, guys, and thank you guys for tuning in.
Aloha.